Jackson's Old Country Store. Come down and join us for lunch today. Breakfast still going on. Several folks milling around the store and picking up breakfast. They usually put the lunch out around 11:30 or so, and it is a spread that you can be proud of. So come on by and pick up some lunch here at the Dixie Cafe in Jackson's Old Country Store. For the next little while, we are going to be the voice for real estate here in 93.1 CWTAR, the Central West Tennessee Association of Realtors. Brent Ward is the executive director. He is our host today, and we have a special guest. And this special guest and I have known each other for a long, long time, so you know that I use special with quotes around it. Good morning, Paul. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. I feel the same way about you.
I know
Jimmy
you do, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
No, we wouldn't.
Good to have you with us this morning, Brent. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. For a Monday, it's not bad at all.
I know. I had a pretty good Monday this morning so far.
Yeah. Why is it? I was just talking to Eddie Holmes a minute ago. We have Saturday, Sunday off, right?
Right. Yeah.
And at the end of the Sunday, we're saying, man, this weekend wasn't long enough. Now a lot of us had 4 days.
I heard that.
And we're still griping because it wasn't long enough.
That's right. Yeah. Well, because you can never have enough time off.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm about to find that out for real.
Oh yeah, that's true. You've been mentioning that since I've been on here with you. So.
I'm about 2.5 months away.
Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
2.5 months.
Yes, sir. Not from this.
Not from this.
Oh, okay.
Not from this. No.
This is the fun job.
I'm here until they drag me out of here kicking and screaming.
That may not be too long.
Well, it may be harder than you think. Oh, man. But we're not here to talk about us. We're here to talk about real estate. And Paul, of course, is in the investment business. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is real estate still a good investment.
That's right. That's what we're talking about. I heard Paul on the actually, I've known Paul for a while, pretty good while. Probably not as long as you guys, but I've known him for a pretty good while. And
my dad was his preacher.
Yeah.
At
There you
Memorial.
go.
Your dad was a lot of folks' preachers.
Yeah. From 69 to 76. So
Yeah.
I've known you longer than I've known.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you go back
Yep.
that far.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I heard, I was on the radio, listening on the radio one Friday afternoon, and I was like, boy, that voice sounds awfully familiar to me on the radio. And lo and behold, it was Paul. So the other day I was thinking, as far as real estate goes, that's one thing that you guys have probably talked about at some point in time, but not on my show anyway. Right. So I thought, let me bring Paul in here and ask him some questions about real estate being an investment. Mm-hmm. And so with that being said, I've always been told, ever since I got into the real estate business, that real estate is always a good investment. What's your thoughts on that as the investor guy?
As well, it depends on what type of real estate you're getting involved with. If you're doing it for residential rental income, yes, it can be a very lucrative return. It needs to be part of a person's portfolio, whether you do it through REITs or you buy individual property. And if you're going to buy individual property, what I usually tell a person that's looking at doing that, because I don't sell that, I'm not licensed, I say go get you a good realtor.
Yep.
Listen to what they say. Pick out the property that's in your price range, and then you and your realtor go find what is a good area to have rental property in. I mean, there's really not any bad area as far as rental property. It's just a matter of the income level you want to go after with that rental income. So I usually tell a person just, I'm going to buy some rental property, okay? Are you looking for yourself? Are you getting a realtor? Sometimes they'll say, well, I'm doing it by myself. And I said, well, get a realtor for the simple fact they know what to look for in a property. Mm-hmm. They know how to handle the contracts. When you buy rental property, this, Brent, the interest rates when you borrow the money are far different.
They are different
than they are on your primary home. So that's where a realtor really will come in to help you find the best loan, the best property, everything for your dollar.
Yep.
And so that's
the amount of money that you have to put in on the front end is going to be considerably different also.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah.
There's a big difference there. There's another topic we'll talk about towards the end, but and it was going through the different type of loans and things to be aware of. So when you're talking about investment property, like you said, you got a much higher down payment that you've got to put down, and if you've never bought investment property and you're dealing with a local bank, they may actually want a little bit more because they want to know you got some skin in the game. It's not like buying a personal home.
Exactly.
And, I've looked into it several times. And, if you've got a good working relationship, you can work them, and once you kind of get going and they see you have a good track record, they're much more willing to really back down on how much they require you to put down on the front end. And because I've got some friends that just over a period of maybe 2 or 3 years with like little or no money out of their pocket, they own like 54 rental units that they've done over a period of 2 or 3 years. And one of them is a realtor, and the other one is my counterpart in another association. So they partnered up. But, you know, that's the thing as far as every class I've ever been to, and I think I mentioned this on a show not too long ago, that if you are a realtor and you're in the real estate business and you don't own rental property, you're kind of missing the call. You're already in there.
Exactly.
You know, and we have so many customers of ours that's what they do, and that's all they do. You know, they got their personal home, but they've been living in that house for 20 years, but they're just constantly buying rental properties, and when the market gets rough and you've already got some under your belt, you can always pick up a good deal, you know, like when the market got so bad back in 08, 09, there was a lot of people picking up a lot of deals.
Oh, yeah.
And I heard the other day, talking about investment property, that, and you may know this more than anybody, but somebody told me the other day that according to our tax assessor here in town, like 42% of all Jackson's homes are rental properties. Have you heard that?
I have not, and that's higher than I would have expected.
It was a lot higher than I would have expected, and I didn't hear it straight from the assessor. That's just what I heard that the assessor told me.
I guess it makes sense, because if you take down the displacement of a lot of people when the tornadoes hit, those several that hit in a row, that moved a lot of people around out of existing housing into rental property.
Yep. And
then you got the downturn in 2007 and 2008 that a lot of people lost houses.
Yep.
And a lot of them converted to the
That's right. They were picking them up at a good deal.
Yeah. And, in fact, there are a couple in my neighborhood that I know are rental properties. And these are $190,000, $215,000 houses. So
yeah, and you don't think about that too much. You know, the only problem with getting too high on your price, and that's something we discovered with my old firm that I used to work for and dealing in property management. It was kind of learn as you go type deal until we got somebody in there that really knew what they were doing. But there's only so much you can charge for rent, and then you kind of hit that ceiling. No matter how big the property is, no matter what you're offering, where it's located, you just kind of, you know, in your area. So like in Jackson, once you got up to about $1,800 or so, you could tack on another 1,000, 2,000 square feet, and that's still about as high as it's going to go.
True. Yeah.
And it's the same for buying property. I'll mention his name because he's a good, dear family friend. Reggie Smith told me, he said, when you get to a certain level, now of course this was 1990.
Yeah.
He said, Paul, when you hit $250,000 to $280,000 on a house, 1990, people go from wanting your house to they want their house.
Exactly.
And so, but I imagine that figure's a lot higher now.
It is.
But there again, it goes back to what is a fair rental value of the property, and do you hit the ceiling? Because it's an economic thing. You know, you got to look at what's the medium income for the area and what people can charge, and then you've also got to look at not only when you get a good realtor, make sure you got a good real estate attorney that can help you with the closing.
Absolutely.
Because you know, that can come back and bite you big time if you're not careful.
And one thing a lot of people don't think about if they're jumping into this new is not only do you need a good attorney to get you into it, and you need a good banker to help you through some rough times.
Oh yeah.
You also need someone, if you're not mechanically inclined, you need someone who can help you with the repairs, because they are going to happen.
They are.
And usually at 2:00 in the morning.
Oh yes.
I will tell you, that is the biggest downfall that most investors make, especially new investors coming into it, is not taking into consideration the maintenance cost of the property they just bought. Because, you know, you're talking about investment and making sure you buy it at the right price and being able to get return on your investment. But until those houses are paid for, there's really no income. I mean, there is, but you can't really use it.
Yeah.
You have to save that income and either put it back in the house, save it for the purchase of the next property that's coming, or just set it to the side for those unforeseen maintenance things that pop up. New hot water heater, roof, you know, damage from the tenant that does something to the property.
Appraisal business, they call that replacement reserves.
There you go.
Yeah.
And you have to have
when you're running a cash flow projection, you've got all of your operating expenses and you've got all of that in there. But if you don't build that in there, that replacement reserve, then you've got a problem.
You do, yeah,
Yeah.
you do, and that's where so many people make their big mistake when they get into investment is they don't take that in. They get a property at a good price. They got a great monthly payment on it. The rent is twice the amount of what they're bringing in, and instead of putting it in a separate account and keeping it totally separate, and not touching it, they just roll it right into their checking account. And you know as well as I do, especially from an investment standpoint, the more you make, the more you spend, right?
Exactly.
And I'm sure
Exactly.
that's pretty much the way it works.
Yep.
Well, one thing, back in the 90s, we had a big real estate developer here, and I always tell a client if they're looking to get a rental property and they're carrying a major amount of debt, that they need to look at adding additional life insurance. You may know who I'm talking about. Back in the 90s, man, relatively young, and passes away suddenly,
Yeah.
and the banks,
Yes.
yeah, the income was still coming in, but the problem was the loans were all in this person's name.
Yeah.
And
Personal
the bank-
guarantees. Yeah.
The bank freaked out, and they started demanding payment in full on these properties within 60 days.
Wow.
Well, they didn't have the money because we're talking several $1 million.
Right.
But that's one thing people need to look at, and probably the banks are going to say, you know, you've got 50 or 20 properties out here, and your total debt load is $600,000, and you're the one that signed for it. So if something happens to you,
Yeah.
what's going to happen to the property?
That's right.
Yeah, and that's something else most people never think about when they're investing. You know, you assume you're going to be here,
Right.
but there are no guarantees past right now.
No, there's not.
And
Yeah.
I don't know enough about the all of the banking regulations because they changed so drastically since I got out of the lending end of it many years ago. But used to be when we were closing a loan, you could not demand, but you could heavily suggest that you need to up your life insurance to cover this, or I can sell you credit life.
Right.
Now, I don't know whether they still do that anymore, or whether they can even do that
Well,
anymore
what banks
or not.
do now is they are in the life insurance
Oh, sure.
business.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's
So,
completely
yeah,
changed. Yeah.
So they'll try to get you. Well, you need more life insurance, and while we're here signing the loan, just sign this application,
Yeah.
and we'll. And usually it's not what the person needs to do. They need to go out and look and
Shop
go back
the market
to,
a little
shop
bit.
the market a little bit, or go back to somebody they trust.
Yep.
It goes back to getting a real estate agent.
I was just
There
getting
you
ready
go.
to say that.
It
There
goes
you go.
back to getting a good real estate attorney and a good banker, and then you're going to need a guy to come in. You're going to need a good property and casualty guy because you've got to look at what, you know. It's different than buying homeowners insurance, and it's different than, you know, now your liabilities are a lot higher because you got, you know, it's, you know, but that's where you go. Start off with a good real estate agent, and they'll tell you how you need to go.
See, I have sold you short today because I don't know whether you knew it or not, but you
What?
just gave us the perfect segue into where we need to be. And that is the four sponsors who sponsor this show every week. The Voice for Real Estate, and they include a lender, which is Leaders Mortgage Services over on Stonebridge Boulevard, 215-6678. That we'll get to a little bit later. I think you said in more depth, but there's so much out there now, so many ways that they can tailor a loan to help you get into that house, whether it be rental property or your regular residence, or maybe a house at the river, whatever.
That's right.
But there are programs out there, and it's more complicated than it used to be. So you need a good lender on the front end. Get pre-qualified. So go by and see Leaders Mortgage Services. Then you need that property and casual person, and that would be Angie Hooten Hughes of Allstate Insurance. Angie can tailor your homeowner's insurance, make sure all the outbuildings, if there are any, are covered, make sure your liability areas are where they need to be. And if you got a car, and if you got some life insurance, you can bundle all that stuff for you and save you a little bit of money at Allstate Insurance. 668-1990 is the local number. Angie's number is 901-373-6060. And then something we haven't talked about is the property inspection, which they do on a regular basis now. Pete Dubuisson at National Property Inspections is one of our sponsors here, and does a great job of going through and letting you know on the front end that everything's where it's supposed to be. Or if it's not, he'll write a report and say, these things you need to consider before you make that offer or before you close this loan. They need to be taken care of. So National Property Inspections is one of our sponsors also. And then you mentioned the attorney, and that would be Bird and Bird. Been doing it in this market since 1985. They do all aspects of residential and commercial closings, title searches, title insurance, foreclosures, if it happens to come to that. Buy-sell agreements, not a bad idea, especially when you're looking at investment properties.
Exactly.
And commercial leases. They can do it all. They inspect each one before it goes to closing. They know that everything is where it should be. Bird and Bird, 424-7188. Also a sponsor here every Monday. And we don't want to forget that we are live right now on Facebook Live.
That's right.
With the CWTAR Facebook page. Paul Schulze with Worthy Road Studios is the man that makes it happen. Paul, you back there? Here comes the hand. There it is. The other hand's busy keeping the wide-angle lens in focus. On some of us. On some of us. But we do appreciate our sponsors. They do.
Brent's the flat belly in this group.
Hey, it's not for lack of trying.
Paul?
Okay, it's taken a while.
I think Paul's the only one that may qualify. Unless you leave out the L, then I'm in.
But one thing you were talking about, you were talking about Charles Bird. That's who I use when I've closed my house. I would recommend him highly. He does a great job. You can't find, there. And I'm not saying there's not other great real estate attorneys out there, but I know Charles. He's a good guy, and he did ours and did an excellent job. So
good deal. We're glad to have him.
We are. We've had him on the show. Paul's a good guy. We had a great conversation just sitting here talking, the two of us. So, actually, speaking of sponsors, I finally got Angie. She's coming on the show in probably 2 weeks, I think.
Great.
2 or 3 weeks,
Excellent.
I think.
Excellent.
So
looking forward to it.
Yeah. So she's hard. She's been so busy, I can't hardly track her down.
That's a good thing.
And she's apologized. I don't know how many times. I was like, it's okay. I'm just trying to get you on the air. That's all
right.
I'm trying to do is get you on.
Just trying to help.
Just trying to help. And that's all I'm trying to do. So we were talking about investing, and real estate is still a good investment, and I believe anybody you would talk to would probably still say the same thing.
Exactly.
Now, you talked about like second homes and investment properties, maybe something at the river, which, by the way, I was at the river last weekend on Saturday. On 4th of July. Having it right in the middle of the week is completely thrown off both weeks.
Too.
So we were there on 4th of July at the river for a few hours with a friend of mine, and going in the area that we were in, and we were way down south on the river, much less crowded, and a lot of huge homes down there on the river. And the person probably still quite a few miles off, but that in the middle of that stretch. We'll say about 6 miles down from Decaturville. Is where we were.
Saltillo and all that area.
Yeah, down in there. And it was just amazing how many of those houses turn over on the river. The person I was with was a real estate agent, and they were pointing out, sold that one, showed this one was on the market. I mean, going down the river as we were going, just pointing out all these houses, and I was just like, wow, there's so much business down here at the river, with those things turned over. But, and those can be investment properties, but now you're talking some really high dollar.
Exactly.
And that would be the same thing if you had a condo down at the ocean, or if you had a chalet up in the mountains, because you're paying a lot more for it. It generates more income, but how often is that income going to be coming in? And those are all factors that you would need to consider.
Well, I go to Lake Junaluska a lot, and we
been there. Yes.
This is my 53rd consecutive year.
Wow.
And we had looked at buying rental property up there, and we're going to be able to rent it out and then use it when we want to. And the real estate agent, and this is where we come in, they said, look, understand the rental period for recreational property is from the end of March to the end of October, unless you're in the mountains area where you can have Christmas and all, Gatlinburg. But you've got to make sure you have the reserve to cover those payments
during those 4 months,
those dead months.
Yep.
And so there again, I keep saying go back to a good real estate agent, because and they say, oh well, I'll rent it out every week. Well, I've heard
maybe
I've heard it's around, you can expect 80 to 85 is going to be your maximum rental occupancy.
Yeah.
Is that about right?
Yeah, actually, if I'm not mistaken, the banks will only consider 75% of whatever your rental income is.
Okay.
They're only going to look at 75 to actually verify that they're not basing it off of anything higher than that.
And then you run into the situation where everything's looking good, and you're in that hot spot in the mountains, and a wildfire comes through there and devastates the entire town.
Yes.
Or burns your. Now you've got property and casualty insurance that's going to cover the replacement of that house, but do most people carry income continuation insurance? That would be a good question to know.
That would be a good question to know.
I'd ask the
that-
Allstate lady.
That would
She
be a good
know
question
that.
for Angie when
Yeah.
she comes on
Yeah,
comes on the show.
And
Yeah.
Tennessee River.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
floods.
had several clients
Yep.
that just, for them to rebuild, they came back and said, you're going to have to put it 16 feet higher up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
I've heard that a
of
lot.
them had just said,
Yep.
I'm just going to tear it down and
Sell the lot.
sell the lot.
Yeah.
And and then, if you got wells, they're bad
Yep.
now.
Yep.
and
They got to be redone.
Redone.
So, yeah. But, and I know this for a fact, even though I don't sell it, homeowners and rental insurance is not cover flood.
It's not, and luckily we as the National Association of Realtors have really put the pressure on the government to continue the national flood insurance, which they keep extending out.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a battle we have to go through every single time that bill gets ready to come up, because at some point in time they could just say, we don't want to do this anymore.
Yep.
And if they don't want to do it anymore, flood insurance individually to try to get, it's not going to be all that cheap.
It's not, and with interest rates going back down, I mean, no one ever thought 8 months ago we'd see the 10-year back around too.
Yeah.
Now, you know this better than I do, Brent, but what I have seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, as interest rates go down, the property selling value goes up. Is that correct?
It typically does, but I will tell you right now, I watched that a lot because back about 3 years ago, I don't know if you've heard of a man named Lawrence Yoon. I talk about him all the time, but he is the National Association of Realtors economic forecaster, and he's on CNN and all these other news channels all the time talking about real estate and its predictions moving forward. And he said about 3 years ago that when the inventory started going down and the rates were also coming down, that was going to create what he called an artificial inflation of housing prices. You think about the whole supply and demand, and it falls into play. But then when you got other factors, when you're dealing with real estate, there are other factors in there that you don't think about when you think about supply and demand, and the mortgage rate is one of those. So when it's cheap and there's not a lot of inventory, housing prices are just going to keep going up and up. Yeah, they do kind of go hand in hand, but we're kind of at we're kind of getting at that threshold where they're not going to be able to go up much more. Matter of fact, I ran some numbers the other day for one of our local magazine publications, and from first quarter to this quarter of this year, our Jackson housing prices, Jackson city limits went up 0.5%. That was all that they moved, and they had been going up 1% to 2%.
Right.
So they're starting to get to that point where they're going to start leveling out. And of course, if they're lowering the rates again, that's going to have an effect on them once again.
Yes.
And my biggest concern, and I don't know this to be true, but my biggest concern is people are going to be buying, because right now housing prices are at a premium.
Exactly.
You buy now and then you have to sell in 2 or 3 years, and if the market just normalizes and drops back down a little bit to kind of normalize out, are you going to be able to sell that house for what you paid for it?
Especially if you're locked in on a 30-year,
Yeah, exactly.
30-year payback, where for the first 7 years or more, you're paying
Basically
twice in interest what you're paying in principal.
And that's not to deter anybody, because if you got to have a house, you got to have a house, and if we can find a place to move to, we might even sell ours and move to another place. The problem is we can't find any place to move to.
Right.
I mean, our house is right in that middle sweet spot there of about 150. So I mean, we could sell it. I mean, my wife. It's so funny. My wife texted me on Friday and said, hey, take a look at this house. It looks a lot like ours, but bigger. And when I got home that afternoon, 3 hours after she sent me that text, it was already pending. By the time we got home, she pulled it back up. She goes, it's already pending. I was like, it's a good house, it's a good price, and it's gone.
It's
I mean,
gone.
that's what they do.
It's gone.
So the other part that I was going to talk about, we still got a few more minutes, was this was kind of interesting. And I actually dealt with some customers back when I did it, and that was, and this falls into the investing part of it, but buying a house for your new student, your college student to live in, versus putting your child in the dorm.
Exactly.
As a cost investment. And so I had Kimberly pull a couple of articles for me, and this one I found was a pretty good article. And I'm just going to read some of the pros and cons here, and you just give me your thoughts on these. But some of the pros is stability for your new student, because, during the summer, if they wanted to stay in the city that their college is in, now they got to find another place to go live, because they can't stay in the dorms during the summertime. So that offers some stability. You got some fixed housing expenses, because every month and every year what it's going to be, because you've got a mortgage on it. More than likely you got a mortgage on it of some sort, versus at college dorms, they could change every year or more often. Storage space is a lot more. You got all the places to keep, because college students today, based on what I can tell, got like everything: bikes, kayaks, hiking equipment, everything else. So and then you got, life lessons they mention in here, because they'll learn about investing, responsibilities of maintaining a property if your student's in there, and then the financial benefits for the parents, because now you've actually got something to show for the money that you're paying every month, a physical piece of property, versus if they're in the dorm, it's like paying rent on an apartment.
Exactly.
There's nothing to go toward. Now, those are all your pros. Now we get into the cons part of it, which is unpredictability, because it said on here students like to transfer a lot. So you don't want to put your student, let's say, at Knoxville, and then they say, I think I'm going to transfer to, Middle Tennessee State. And now then you've got a rental property up in Knoxville you got to figure out what to do with. Responsibility. Some students aren't ready for that type of responsibility. Insufficient appreciation. We just talked about that, because you're talking about it, probably maximum you're going to sell it in 4 to 5 years anyways, or do something with it, and in 4 or 5 years you're going to be able to build enough appreciation in that property to sell it for what you paid for it. And then the next one is additional costs, like if it's not real close to the campus, your students got to get there either by bus or gas, or and then you're talking about food. If they're on campus, they got some sort of food program. So there's just utilities, insurance, maintenance, taxes, all that stuff that goes into it. So once again, that comes back in. But what are your thoughts on that? Because I've actually had some customers in Jackson, Tennessee, that were coming here to look at houses for their students to live in, because they were going to Union.
Going to Union?
Yeah.
Well, I think in most cases it is a good option to look at. I've got several clients whose children went to Ole Miss, and they kept the condo and all that down there and used them as Airbnb.
Yeah, there you go.
But there you go. But there again, though, you've got to be ready for the changes that's going to happen when you say my child's living here and I bought them to home to go into, now it's an Airbnb. So the mortgages and stuff will change. That's it really depends on, like you said, the town, where Jackson, Knoxville, Nashville, the Vanderbilt area, even maybe U of M. I know it's a big thing to do at Lexington, Kentucky. And that's the problem they're having there, is their dorm occupancy has gone down 15% because these people are buying their kids' condos. And what they're looking at it is, hey, I can go up for the ball games.
Yep.
I got a place to stay. When the kids graduate, I may keep it because I got a place to stay when I go to the ball games, and I can rent the other rooms out.
Right.
I think it's a good option. You got to look at what are they charging for room and board, and you've got to figure in what is my mortgage payment, utility payment, and food costs going to be for that child to have that house.
Exactly.
But I would say if it's a major college town, even Jackson would fall into this. It's a good option to look at, because when I was in college, room and board were half of my bill.
Yes.
If not, and somebody says, well, it only costs $16,000 to go to the school. That's tuition. What is room and board going to cost?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I think it's a good option, and I would recommend it if it's not going to put a financial strain on the parent.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great option.
This article mentioned that it was about $5,000 to $10,000 a year on average is what just the room and board part is going to be all by itself. So if it costs $16,000 to go to school there, tack on an additional $10 just for a place to stay and food to eat while you're there.
Exactly.
Through the college itself.
You could get you're going to have a suite mate in college.
That's right.
True.
Yes.
Hey,
that helps.
You know what you do? You go to your suite mate, say to the parents, you're paying $10,000. How would you like to pay only $6,000? Well, there's $500 a month coming in.
That's right.
If you got a 3-bedroom, even and 2 bath.
Yeah.
Well, there's another $1,000 a month coming in. You could rent out the other 2 rooms.
True. It's funny you mentioned that, because the customer that I had, one of the last customers I had before I retired my license, was looking at a house, in the Deer Creek subdivision, which is not too far away from Union. You know, probably 5-minute drive, if even that, to get to Union from there. And they were looking at about a 2,300 square foot house in a neighborhood at the end of a cul-de-sac and fenced in backyard. You know, something I'm normally selling to a family, right? And so they're looking at it, and their son was going to go to school there. He already had 2 of his friends that they knew were also going to go to Union as well, and I'd already talked to their parents, so they had agreed to pay them rent to live in this property. But it had 4 bedrooms in it, and they were saving the 4th bedroom for them. So when they came down to visit or came to games or whatever, they had a place to stay, just like you mentioned, when they got here, and it was going to save them because even as an investment property, their mortgage on it was only going to be like $1,100. Of course, now this was like 8 years ago, you know, but it's going to be like $1,100, which was way cheaper than it was going to cost him and his 2 roommates to rent a dorm for, or not rent, but live in the dorms on campus, and they're only 5 minutes away.
And see, that's where I go back to. What is it going to cost? All right, I buy this, I get my son's college friends, and I go to them, just pay me half of what the dorm cost would be.
Right.
But, you know, that's going probably more make it'll at least cover the house payment, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, we're about to run through the allotted time, but I want to ask you one thing we haven't touched on in any depth, and maybe we can't in this short of a time period, but the tax ramifications of owning rental property.
It's going to be taxes.
It's going to be taxes. Ordinary income is what it's going to be.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a lot more that could go into this because as we're sitting here talking, I'm thinking about all these other areas that we could hit on here. This was almost enough for a whole nother show.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it'd be taxed as normal. And what I was going to come back to, Paul's been saying the whole time, which I was going to say anyways, which was, you know, get in touch with a good realtor, somebody that you trust and that can walk you through this process. But I'm going to throw it back on Paul a little bit too. You need to get with your financial advisor or your banker and find out what can you do and what are the options, because a lot of people, when they think of investment, all they think about is rental. That's it. That's the only thing that they ever think about. But there's so much more to investing in real estate than just rental.
Oh, yeah.
You've got flipping. You've got the Airbnbs. You've got what we were talking about here with your students' dormitory.
You even got farmland income.
Farmland income, which that's what my brother and I have inherited, the farmland now. So now we're farmland landlords. Yeah. You know, so we're learning a lot about that too. Just so happens our farmer's a old high school friend of ours that we graduated with and went to church with for years. So, you know, so he's been very forthcoming. But yeah, those are just some of the ways to invest. You got commercial investing, falls into Jimmy's category here.
Yeah.
Of you know, buying commercial property. A lot of people buy commercial property for no other reason than just
generate income.
Income. That's it. So yeah, so a lot of stuff here to talk about.
Yeah, there is, and maybe we can do that.
Well, we'll probably have Paul back again. I'm sure we will. So, Paul, thanks for being here, by the way. I appreciate it. Short notice, but I appreciate it.
And if he brings up any stories, they're not true.
I've got my own. So
I was just getting ready to say, you should be looking at Jimmy. So you should be looking at. I don't have too many stories on you, Paul.
Hair Investment Group, am I correct?
Hair Financial Group.
Financial Group. Okay, give me a phone number or contact for you if anybody needs to talk to you.
731-664-0047.
Excellent. We can do that. Man, I appreciate you taking your time.
No problem.
Me too.
It's good to see y'all. It's
Thanks,
good
Paul.
to see Brent. I hadn't seen him in a while, and so it's good to reconnect with him. And when he called me, he said, "You don't remember me?" I said, "Yeah, I do."
Well, he only threw me off 1 second. I thought, well, he knows who I am. Then he said something, and I was like, well, maybe he doesn't know who I am.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the only sad thing about the whole thing today is if I'd known you were coming, I would have brought you a new calendar because I know you're about to start with your.
Oh man. The running joke, real quick.
Okay, yeah. So what is this?
Normally, I'm an umpire.
Right.
I
Okay.
referee football, but that night, our line judge was not there, so they put me on the wide receivers, and I'm running up and down the field. And Steve Bowers made a comment, Paul's really keeping up with him, and then, of course, that just left the door open for Jimmy. He said, yeah, Paul's moving so fast you can time him with a calendar.
With a calendar. He's never letting me forget that.
No, I haven't.
He got a mind like an elephant. He don't remember anything. Paul, thanks again, man. It's always good to be with you.
It's good to see y'all.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Ward, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Jimmy.
As
Appreciate
always.
it.
I think you're going to be away next week on some business, but
I am going to go get me some learning.
All right.
I'm going to take
bring
off.
me back a batch of it while you're there.
I'll see what I can gather up for you.
Sounds good. You have a good trip, and we'll hopefully we'll have a guest in your place. And
I'm hoping so.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to have somebody in here
if
for
not,
you.
We'll wing it.
That's right. I'm sure you can.
That's right. Paul Schulze with Worthy Road Studios. Thank you so much for
Thanks, Paul.
making this available to the Facebook folks. And we'll see you again next Monday at about 10:15 with the Voice for Real Estate presentation of CWTAR.
Ready, set.